What's up, folks? Welcome to another primary source walkthrough. This time, we have the president that sucked more than a vacuum, Herbert Hoover. That is a terrible joke. Um, I'm not a big fan of Herbert Hoover's, but still, anytime there's a terrible pun about vacuums sucking, I just can't help myself. So, I don't know what to say. All right, so let's get into this. The first thing that we need to do is let's set the stage. And if you are following along in the textbook, you know that we've been discussing the New Deal. The New Deal, I argued in the weekly introduction video, is a major turning point in American history. And the reason why is because the New Deal fundamentally imagines what the United States government is supposed to do. And as a result, it completely imagines the United States of America. It is a identity defining piece, or pieces in this case, of legislation. I know that there might be some historians who would contest this, or maybe downplay, not downplay, that's not the right word, but not attach as much significance to the New Deal. But I think that, ultimately we would be talking pretty close to about the same sort of level of interest here. So, this is not to say, of course, that everyone in the United States agreed with the policies of the New Deal. And again, consider the presidents that come right before Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That is Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. And their politics is a more classically conservative politics that believes that the government should not interfere with some of the things that the New Deal attempts to do. It shouldn't make policies about banks, and it shouldn't regulate this thing unnecessarily or that thing unnecessarily. And it is a politics that is still present during the New Deal. Now, the United States, of course, the public decides that they are going to vote by and large for Franklin Roosevelt in 32, and then in 36, and then in 40, and then in 44. He wins 4 consecutive terms. He's a very popular politician. So, Hubert Hoover, of course, just doesn't go away. Presidents very unfrequently just fade into the ether, let's say. As you know, in modern life, Bill Clinton is still very active. Barack Obama is still very active. We don't hear as much from George W. Bush, unless he's painted something new or he's hanging out with Michelle Obama, which we see every once in a while. Jimmy Carter's still alive. He's our oldest living president, and he's still building houses for Habitat for Humanity. Underrated dude, I think. Maybe not the best president, but certainly just a really good human being. And I imagine that if Donald Trump loses the election in the next month, that won't be the last that we hear of him. And just likewise, if he remains in office and after his second term is up, I don't think he's gonna just fade into nothing either. That's just not who he is. In any case, so Herbert Hoover's got some thoughts about the New Deal, and he doesn't like it. He thinks that this is way too much, and he is railing against it. And he has some really, really dire things to say about the New Deal. Now, I think that you will find in this document that a lot of the criticism that Hoover is leveling at the New Deal is pretty reminiscent of some of the things that we talk about in our politics in 2020. So, for example, one of the biggest issues of the last, not just decade, but really the last several decades, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and now even the 2020s, is healthcare. We've been talking about healthcare for forever. And there's to say that there are two sides of this coin is to simplify the problem. But if we simplify the problem, we might say that the debate is between a capitalistic approach to healthcare, free market competition, no needless regulation, etc., that sort of thing, and a more socialistic approach to healthcare. And when people argue for the more socialist approach to healthcare, European countries are often invoked, especially the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Norway, Finland, etc. Even Canada, they're not Nordic at all. they're just north, but not Nordic. They're not Scandinavian, though I'm sure there are Scandinavians who live there. In any case, there's this kind of tension in our politics where, the stuff that's coming out of Europe is not always seen as good for America. And I think that there's a book to be written about this if there hasn't been already. I would imagine there is. I just don't know what it is. But if you're an aspiring historian, and you are independently wealthy and can afford to go to grad school and not take on a ridiculous amount of student loans for a almost 0% chance that you get a job in the academy, that's a book you should write, or a dissertation you should write. In any case, I bring that up because one of the things that Hoover's going to talk about in this source is how the New Deal seems like a European idea. So there's, part of this genealogy of this idea that European political ideas are bad ones. So, the way that Hoover casts the New Deal and the fight over the New Deal is it is a battle. Look what he says here. But in the larger sense, it is a convention of Americans, this is the Republican National Convention, to determine the fate of those ideals for which this nation was founded. This transcends all partisanship. So he is saying that it is up to the Republican Party to save the United States from the New Deal Democrats. That is a pretty striking thing to say. I mean, all or nothing rhetoric in politics is pretty common, at least now in 2020. The apocalyptic language coming out of both sides of our political spectrum is intense. And, it's up to you to decide how much of that you think is true, but the way we talk about politics is very much all or nothing, and this is quite like that. He says that he's looked into the New Deal, and he says that it's emotional economics, that it doesn't obey logic and reason, that we're just doing this to feel good. It's not going to work out great for the United States in the long run, he says, but it's just, look, we bought too much into human sympathy, etc., and now in the cloak of human sympathy and desire to win elections, we're doing this nonsense, or the Democrats are doing this nonsense. And he says that, look, it's a mixture of European ideas flavored with our native predilection to get something for nothing. And you can tell what I think about it by this little note I made in the margins. Bruh. Um, it's what to me. It's really interesting to see a politician say, "America is founded on the notion of like hard work and free enterprise, etc., but also that we have this inborn need to get something for nothing." I that seems to be talking out of both sides of the mouth. But in any case, you can see some other classic arguments appear here. He's talking about worrying about the national debt down here. A long political football that both parties have used against each other, though one more than another, I would think. He's worried about taxes on the rich, and now he's even going as far as to say that freedom to work for himself is changed into a slavery of work for the follies of government. Now, that's a really dramatic thing to say. I mean, to invoke the language of slavery, is to always kind of go to the extreme. It's the same as calling anybody who believes in left wing ideas a communist, or anybody who believes in more conservative ideas a Nazi. I mean, there are real communists and there are real Nazis even in 2020. Not everyone who believes more conservatively is a Nazi, and not everybody who believes more liberally is a communist. But still, we say this all the time. And I wonder, do wage workers actually work for themselves? I mean, maybe he's talking about the small businessman or woman who has opened up their own business. But I mean, for the average wage worker, are you working for yourself, or are you really working for somebody else, and you're exchanging your labor and getting a small sum of money in return for that labor, while the other person benefits from your labor? Think about it. Like, if you work at McDonald's, you're making, I don't know, let's say $10 an hour at McDonald's, and your labor is producing probably more than $10 an hour worth of revenue for that McDonald's. So are you really working for yourself, or are you working for the benefit of the company? That's a interesting philosophical economic question. In any case, he goes on and continues to talk about the foibles of the New Deal. He says the New Deal forgets it is solely by production of more goods and more varieties of goods and services that we advance the living and security of men. He is saying that, look, you have to have a completely open free market for things to work. And he's even willing to invoke some biblical language here to support this. And I think this is a reference to the book of Exodus, where Moses and Aaron and Joshua are kind of standing over the land of Canaan and looking over this final place that the Jews get to go to after they escape from Egypt. He's saying we had come so far, and now we seem to be going backwards. He appeals again to this idea of reason over emotion. And this is a very man thing to do. When I engage with my more conservative friends, or I engage with conservatives online, there's always kind of this sense that emotion is bad and cold, calculating reason is good. And that's what we're seeing here too. I don't think that emotion is bad, or an unqualified bad, or that reason is an unqualified good. But when we kind of think about the way we argue about things and our positions on things, this is a a common cudgel that's used in the language of logic and persuasion. In any case, so he ends his talk to the Republican National Convention, and he says, "Or have you determined to enter in a holy crusade for liberty, which shall determine the future and the perpetuity for a nation of free men?" Again, this is the language of the apocalypse here. We are on a holy crusade for liberty, he's saying. That the New Deal is this affront to free market capitalism, and we must do whatever it takes to end it. And look, I'm a medievalist, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about the Crusades. I've written about the Crusades. I've read so much about the Crusades. And one of the things about the Crusades is that it's an apocalyptic enterprise. And take my world history course if you want to know more about that. But here it's that all or nothing language. If he's invoking the language of the crusade here, I mean, he's demonstrating how serious he thinks this is, and that's something that we should take notice of. So, in any case, this is Hoover's idea of what the New Deal means. When we look at FDR, we're going to see the other side of the coin. So don't think, I'm either just completely trashing Hoover or completely supporting Hoover here. We're going to look at the other side of this argument, and we're going to see what the New Deal means to the politicians who supported it. And then we're going to dig even further and see what the New Deal meant to others. And in some cases, it's great, and in some cases, it doesn't make a difference whatsoever. So, with that said, folks, I'm going to wrap it up here. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them for you, and I will see you for the next one. Be good to yourselves. Take care.